Ravi Agarwal, let me come to you first. There's a humanitarian situation building on the ground in Gaza at this stage. And there is no electricity for their last remaining power generation center. The Israel strikes continue. Could you reflect a little on the humanitarian situation sort of building up in Gaza, and what is the way around this immediately?
Vishnu, I'm really glad you're beginning with the humanitarian situation, because that really is something that affects both sides here. It is something that I think the Israeli forces are going to have to think long and hard about, as much as they are really angry about the number of dead on their side, upwards of 1,200 at this point. They have to weigh that versus the 150 plus hostages that they are trying to save, and at what cost that will come. The costs are already being imposed on the people who are living in Gaza, many of whom had nothing to do with this attack. And so it's very important to disassociate those people living in Gaza from Hamas, which is a militant group, of course, and its armed military wing, the Al-Qassam Brigade. It is clear, however, that Israel is very determined to take out Hamas's military operations here. It is likely going to commence those operations soon. Those operations will last for days. They will be bloody. It is going to be an awful humanitarian situation. The people of Gaza are likely to struggle immensely through this. As you said, they are out of electricity at this point unless there are generators. Spare a thought for how hospitals are going to have to cope with this. And also, amid all of this, we continue to learn the immense atrocities that were conducted on the Israeli side over the last few days, which are just horrific. And so calls for restraint as well are going to be tested in these moments.
Ravi, let me ask you another question. It is almost inevitable that there will be a ground offensive at some stage by Israeli forces. Assuming that that does take place, what is the end game of that? Do you foresee a permanent Israeli occupation? Is that even realistic? Managing that sort of scenario would be very difficult. What would the outcomes eventually be? Ideally, what the Israelis would be looking at?
So I think their priorities are going to be layered. I think, first of all, they're going to be thinking about the hostages. Many of the hostages, we should remind our viewers, are women, the elderly, children even. I think their first priority is going to be to figure out how to make sure that they are able to save these hostages. Again, keep in mind the historical sense of how much Israel values hostages. Many years ago, when Gilad Shalit was captured by the Palestinians, they released 1,000 prisoners to accommodate his release. So keep that in mind in the next few days as the Israelis game out what they need to do. Obviously, they want to make sure that they are able to strike at Hamas as surgically as possible to make sure that Hamas is neutralized in the immediate term, but also in the medium to longer term. And then after that, to do that, the question is, what steps need to be taken, how much of Gaza they will need to sort of cover in their ground offensive. And keep in mind, this is an incredibly densely populated area, 2.3 odd million people living there in an area that is about half the size of London. So for your viewers to understand how difficult it is going to be to try and conduct these operations.